What an awesome crowd, a little intense, because typically when people hear me, they don't have to pay to come and hear me speak. With the exception, every time Bob Layton comes to my office, I charge him something. What a wonderful crowd. Thanks, Spirit, for bringing the former mayor. Now everyone will know I'm not the tall, dark, and handsome mayor, but that's okay. I've told people before I didn't expect to be able to do this job and get by just on my good looks and charm. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we run through some of these slides, even though I'll tell you, Jason Watkins told me I could stand up here for the next 20 minutes and just tell Marissa Kate stories for 20 minutes. Appreciate that. We may fit one or two of those in, we'll see. Marissa Kate always has wonderful advice. But this is really the first opportunity that I've had with such a great room full of people to kind of clear the air a bit. And I want to do that today. As some of you might know, the Chamber did not endorse me during that tough mayoral campaign. But that's okay, because we think it's working out just fine. I am here to tell you that I think that my relationship with the Chamber probably couldn't be any better than it is today. So thank you all. I will share that so that you understand how men work. I have shared this story before. 7th grade year, second day of class. And we don't have media in the room, do we? I get expelled from school on the second day of class, my 7th grade year, for fighting. Who would have thought, as passive as I am? But that gentleman that I fought with ended up being one of my best friends, and so I think that works too for sharing the story with Chamber. I will tell you, in 1978, I had the pleasure of fighting in the North American Taekwondo Championships and made it all the way to the quarterfinals and got beat by a Canadian. Still don't like that guy, so it doesn't work every time. We will see if we can get these slides to work. I did want to share one Marissa Kate story because it's kind of a public service announcement, and Jason would be upset if I didn't share at least one. So Marissa Kate, 6 years old, has quite the wit about her, and she latches on to these words of the month. Her new word to learn was apparently. And so I asked her the other day, I said, Marissa Kate, how's it going? And she said, well, Papa, my dad was driving me to school last week, and apparently when you change lanes, you have to use your turn signals. So that is your public service announcement from a 6-year-old. When I campaigned for this gig, there were some very specific things that I wanted to work on. And we talked about that during the campaign: economic development, infrastructure, and quality of life. And you heard me say over and over again, when we talk about economic development, I really liked what was starting to bubble up at the time with the innovation plan at WSU, the blueprint for regional economic growth that we call BREG, and the export plan that has all come together. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute, but that has all fallen into place under the Greater Wichita Partnership, utilizing the Chamber and some of these business leaders in the room, their guidance. And I couldn't be more thrilled about where that's going and the direction that we're heading into development, and that will continue to be a focus for my term in office. Someone asked me, what's it like to be mayor? That is just a weekly glance at my schedule. At one time, my lunch schedule was booked out for 45 days in advance. And multitude of visits with business leaders, chamber folks, staff people, And I would share, I think I've got 45 minutes on Thursday, and they'd say, no, we'd rather wait and go to lunch with the mayor. And so it tends to have a busy schedule, and it doesn't just stop with being the mayor. You look at what the council members do on a daily basis, and a little bit of that conversation was held last Tuesday by some folks in the community. It's committee assignments, it's speaking engagements. For a while, every group in Wichita, whether they were a neighborhood association or Wichita Independent Business Association, they wanted to have the mayor come and give them an update or hear from the mayor or meet the mayor, and we didn't turn anyone down. We would speak to everyone. So there's a whole lot of people in this town that have heard Marissa Kate stories. But it's getting better. I am going to share this because I shared this with Debbie. She asked me what was maybe the most overwhelming part of, or what was the most surprising part of being mayor, and I said it really was the schedule. It was just incredibly overwhelming, at least for the first couple of months. In fact, my dear mother, who watches every council meeting because we televise on Channel 7 live, calls me about 2 minutes after a council meeting, first couple of months in office. She said, son, she goes, you're not getting enough sleep, are you? And I said, well, it's been a crazy schedule, Mom. She goes, well, you look like I said, thanks, Mom. And it was like that for the first couple of months. It was just literally back-to-back-to-back meetings, crazy evening schedules. And oftentimes I would find the only time I'd have to catch up on the emails was 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then start the routine all over again. But as mentioned, we'll get to this next slide. First year in review, we are really trying to focus on economic development and regionalism. And one of the things that excites me a little bit when we talk about regionalism is some of the visits that we have made with the chamber and some of our friends around. We went to Greenville and we saw firsthand how regionalism is working for their area. And the nice thing about that is, and their mayor shared with us, for America to be great, cities need to be successful. And we are here for you. You don't need to go through the bumps and hurdles that we did. We're happy to share and let you know what's worked for us. And regionalism works for them, and it can work for us. And we're starting to see that happen. And one of the players is Workforce Alliance, who is kind of becoming that backbone to help us with regionalism, because as we know, when we talk about jobs and economic development, much of it starts with workforce. And so pretty excited about that. We, thanks to a lot of hard work from a lot of people, we finally opened a new airport. This is something that had been in the works for a long time, and we get compliments all of the time, even with the new mayor's voice in the airport, Mr. Brewer. But it really is a great front door to the city, and hopefully just another piece of that puzzle that helps us become a more successful region. Some of you may have heard one of the things that we are taking on right now is looking at selling the Hyatt. We are working our way through that issue. And not that it was ever a horrible plan to own the Hyatt. I can tell you we're just in a much, much different place today than we were when we purchased that Hyatt back in 2001 or something like that. And so we think that now, because of where Wichita's at, where Wichita's going with the investment in the past, we're probably at a good time to look at selling it out of the hotel business. And then we can utilize that, because the attractive thing about selling it is we have no debt on the Hyatt. And so it will give us an opportunity to take those and put them into one-time assets somewhere in the city. And that will do nothing but help us move this city forward. I want to talk a little bit about the transit system and infrastructure in general. and I've said this before, transit is so much more than the transit dependent. For our city to be successful, we have to utilize transit as a key infrastructure piece in our city, because it's getting critical people to work that otherwise wouldn't work. But it's so much more than that. It's helping economic development in a number of different ways that includes tourism and conventions and much of the. And we all do it when we travel. I can tell you, in the last probably 6, 7, 8 years, rarely do I rent a vehicle when I travel to cities. I try and use public transportation or walk. And so I was just in Nashville with my wife, and we walked everywhere, with some exception. She wanted to go shopping, and there are no malls in downtown Nashville. If you want to go shopping in Nashville, you're going to travel 10 or 15 miles to the outskirts. They have no opportunities to buy unless you want boots or hats. And she didn't want boots or hats, so we had to travel out to the mall. Fortunately for us, we were a block and a half away from the major transit hub. We hopped on a bus, went out to the mall, finished our shopping, timed it perfectly, went back to the bus stop, and within 5 minutes hopped on a bus and came back to our hotel. And we need those kinds of opportunities for Wichita. We did approve our budget this year. That was about $227 million with no mill levy increase. Added a little bit more to our reserves. We have about $27 million in emergency reserves. We're in pretty good financial shape in this city, much of it thanks to former mayor, or maybe Bob Layton had to do with it. But we've had a good group, and we're in pretty good financial shape, with the exception we do have to figure out what we're going to do with transit. And we're going to out here fairly quickly. We have moved some monies over into that so that we can keep that going again for this next year, but it'll be a challenge come 2017. This is a nice shot talking about our new spaces. We are moving forward with our Advanced Learning Library Center. It's going to be a great space that's going to be community gathering space and change the face of Wichita in a positive way. I have said before, if I'm not known for anything else in my term as mayor, I hope people recognize that I have a passion for quality of life, and this is a major quality of life initiative that will help us as we grow. Again, I'll use a story from Nashville. They just built, I say just built, about 10 years ago, they built an $80 million downtown library because they saw the value in what libraries still bring to a vibrant city. And we're looking at something much smaller than that. We're looking at a $30 million library in rough numbers. But their mayor at the time was incredibly fond of what libraries could do for upstarts, vibrant cities, and he really got the community behind him on that. And here's why. He started his first business out of the public library, using all of the resources available to him in a public library that he wouldn't have access to otherwise. We'll have very similar resources. He ended up selling that business for several $1 million, but he started it in a public library. So libraries are certainly so much more. And then, you know, some of the shared space. We have shared space that we're going to be utilizing with our friends at the county. We still recognize some of those shared spaces and assets that we have in this community that help learning, workforce, improve our workforce. NCAT's certainly at the top of that list. And we have some of the best in the world, and I'll mention that because I have a slide coming up I want to talk about some of those assets. This is a photo of the area that's going to be our new urban wetlands park that is now garnering national attention. And our friends over here at the far table, the Slauson Group, are a big partner in helping this happen. It's going to be a wonderful development that sits at 29th and Mays Road, and the first urban wetlands park that we know of in its size in the country. and it's really going to be an asset to the city, and we're thrilled that we are going to be able to make that happen. And so these are, again, some of the quality of life things that I'm going to encourage us to do, along with the walking paths that we are building out, and we are spending over the next 10 years several $1 million, tens of millions of dollars to do some of those things, and improve our parks in other ways. Our new council member on the block, everyone's favorite, Brian Fry, got to open up a ribbon cutting or groundbreaking for a new splash park in West Wichita for the first time in the history of Wichita. And so, way to make me look bad again, Mr. Fry. But those are the kinds of investments that we know that are going to make a difference for our community, and they love it. I mentioned international trade, our global trade partners. We had the opportunity to have President Vicente Fox in Wichita recently. That is a picture of Vicente Fox with the governor. And since I mentioned the governor, again, media, be careful about this. I was in this room a couple of months ago when the governor spoke. He didn't have this many people. Don't tell him that. But I thank you all. We had an opportunity to sit down with President Fox, and he has a real passion. We're pretty fortunate because what brought him here, his business partner and his best friend, who was like president of FedEx Mexico, ended up marrying a young lady who grew up in Kansas and still has property in Winfield, and he made the promise to his wife that he will do business in Kansas at some point in time before he dies. And so they came here on a very specific mission looking at aviation, advanced manufacturing, agriculture, and oil and gas, right in our wheelhouse, Gary, for the BREG initiative. And we think that there are opportunities that we can continue to pursue in international trade. The beauty of that is President Fox shared with us that Mexico has 48 trade agreements with other countries all over the world, some that we don't have trade agreements with. So when we want to look at helping our local companies be more successful, we can team with those folks in Mexico and build the components and let them assemble the components and use their trade agreements, and it helps our companies grow. And he was very impressed with NCAT, and he took a tour of that. And so we think there's opportunities to pursue some growth in our trade with our friends in Mexico, and as President Fox shared, and I share every time I get a chance, it's nice when we can trade and have partners in North America. And people forget Mexico is North America. And they're on the same time zone. It's much easier to deal with, and it helps us be more globally competitive with places all over the world when we do that. We are going to continue to look at opportunities in China as we pursue those. I know Mayor Brewer did a nice job of traveling over there. We may send him again, Spirit, if that's okay, because I'm not looking forward to maybe a long plane ride. Big guys in a plane doesn't fit well unless they can fly privately, and I don't think we have that in our budget, do we, Bob? But we'll work that because we think that that's still critically important. I've got to get through a few more slides so I can open up for questions, because I know that some of you just want to ask how Marissa Kate's doing, things like that. I did mention our Public Works. We did focus on beefing up our Public Works Department specifically for snow removal this year. We added 9 new trucks this year, and instead of auctioning off the old ones, we kept them. We saw those work firsthand on Thanksgiving Day. We now have 61 trucks total. All 61 trucks were out in force on Thanksgiving Day. I said this at the council meeting. Thank you to the Public Works folks and the road crews. They did a phenomenal job. And they kind of get beat up when they have sometimes things out of their control. And so when they do a phenomenal job, even though we know that they're getting extra duty pay, they do need to be commended. So thank you for congratulating them. And I want to also mention some of the other things we're doing with Public Works, because we mentioned this just in our council meeting this last week. We are changing the way that we handle our water resources. Recently, we have entered into a contract to help with taking a good look at all of our sewer and water resources and maybe how we can be more efficiently. We think there's some really good news on the horizon we will share hopefully soon, talking about how we use water. But here's something that I think gets lost. The Equus beds today, and we've been fortunate since I've been mayor, I must have a closer relationship with whoever is able to give us rain, Mr. Brewer, because since I've been mayor, the Equus beds now are 96% full. 96% full. That's a great position to be in. But there's a couple of things that happened that made that work. We went to the state and we said, state, can you help us out? Cheney Lake has two different pools. They have their normal dam, and then they have a reserve pool, and typically once we got into that reserve pool, they required us to open the floodgates and let all the water run to Oklahoma. We went to the state and said, look, if you will allow us to keep it into that reserve pool at so many feet, we will pull water out of Cheney Lake first and the Equus bed second. And so we were privy to information just this last week that showed us over this last year, because of wet weather, we only used 10% of our water from the Equus beds and 90% of our water from other sources. That included some days bringing water straight out of the river into our treatment facility to operate and begin the process of potable water. But now when we have excess water in that reserve, instead of open the floodgates, we're tapping that and bringing that to Wichita. And it's made a big difference, and it will continue to make a big difference. And so when those folks look at what we're doing today and they go, yeah, you guys had a $250 million plan, and now, we heard some numbers yesterday that a phased-in approach might only be as little as $60 to $80 million total if we did everything. It's because we have changed the game by what we're doing, and the state has helped us. And it's nice to be in the position that we're in. And much of that is because of our staff using opportunities to look at the way we bring in our water differently, and it's making a difference. And so it's nice to be in a position where we're not scrambling every year. I want to talk about looking forward. And again, my focus is going to continue to be on regionalism and economic development. We're going to do it in a fashion that helps all of us be more successful. We will call that the Mark Nichols plan. Everybody be successful. And we think that we have an opportunity to do that when we talk about economic development. I mentioned the Greater Wichita Partnership, the Blueprint for Regional Economic Growth, and the WSU Innovation Campus. When we talk about spending money for economic development, I made it very clear, and I think this group and the city manager has made it very clear, we really are kind of out of the business of cash incentives. That doesn't mean that we're going to spend less money. We're going to invest every which way we can, and we're going to fight like crazy to grow our economy, but we're going to do it in a way that ensures our investment stays here. That doesn't mean we're going to save money by not doing cash incentives. It just means that we're going to look at a different approach to how we grow our economy. And again, I will tell you, I think the Chamber's on target. The Greater Wichita Partnership's on target. The businesses that are helping us grow that. And all of the different partners, including WEBA and the Workforce Alliance and REAP and WSU, it's going to work. And we're starting to see some of that work right now. And we're just now going vertical with the Innovation Campus. And we're already seeing some of the good things that are happening there that are going to help our community. We also added, finally, after I don't know that I ever yelled at him, but the manager did finally add a significant partner in our opportunity to grow our economy, and that's the addition of Scott Rigby. And Scott's going to be a wonderful addition to what we're trying to achieve here in this region. This is for my friends at the county. I know that you're going to help us here with this. This is going to be a discussion that we're going to continue to have. This is the distribution of the sales tax. I know you see a lot of numbers, and I'm going to explain a little bit of this for you. The sales tax that's collected countywide, we'll just say in round numbers, is roughly 100 million. It's a little more than 100 million. As you can see, Wichita collects about 77 million of that. We get back 59 million of that. So we're in the hole about 17 million. The other lines are what other cities are doing and what Sedgwick County gets back. They collect about 16 million, and they get back 29 million. We've got to figure out a way to change this disparity, and I will say this, and we visit with our friends at the county. We will continue to visit with them. For Wichita to be the economic engine that it needs to be for the state of Kansas, we can't be leaking oil, and this is leaking oil when we are spending money outside of our opportunity to be that economic engine. And so we've got to figure this out, because Wichita does need to be the economic engine for the state. And so how we utilize those dollars that we generate in Wichita is going to be something that we have to work through, and I know that we'll figure out a way to get there. Building our future, again, I mentioned that we have had the opportunity to visit our peer cities. I keep referring to Greenville. I think that was a really good trip that the Chamber put together. I don't know who were the brains of that operation. I'm guessing it wasn't Watkins. It was someone else with the Chamber. But that was a great visit that helped us understand what successful cities are doing and some of the things that we can do to repeat that here locally and in our region. Our council is dedicated to figuring out what we need to do as a group. We had nearly the entire council go to Nashville, and they were in the middle of all kinds of different seminars. I think for the first time we had one of the local television stations following us around, and I think we impressed them on all of the opportunities that we had as we were working our way through Nashville. And we're going to continue to look at what we can do to invest in our city to make our city better. And it is about getting out, spending the time doing the kinds of learning that we need to do. This may shock you, but no one's born into this kind of job. You really have to figure it out and learn as you go. And I think we've got a council that understands what learning as you go means, and they're doing a terrific job. I know many of you are thinking right now, that is a good council, and anybody could be mayor, and that's probably right. But I'm fortunate to have the group that I work with today. Want to really just say thank you. It's an awesome opportunity to do what I do on a daily basis. I'm thrilled with the relationship that I've been able to form with business leaders in this community, with my friends at the Chamber. Glad I could kind of clear the air a little bit. I probably won't utilize any of that old information except for when I want Watkins to buy me a beer or when I want Mr. Plummer to give me strokes on the golf course. But other than that, we're totally good, and we appreciate what you guys do. And the reality is, we can't move this community forward unless we're all working together. And the job's more important than any of us individually. And we've got a great city that can be made better by working together. So I don't know if I have time for questions. So if there are a couple of questions, we can. Yes, sir.
Mayor, if you could ask every Wichitan to do one thing, what would that be?
Oh, Scott, that's a great question. That's a great question. You know, if you could ask every Wichitan to do one thing, what would that be? I'm going to tell you, it's as a community, it's coming together, caring about your neighbor. You know, we talk about making our community better and at the neighborhood level. some of those things that make our community better are neighbors watching out for neighbors. Our neighborhood watch programs, our public safety is at the top of that list. And, you know, if every person in this city said, I'm going to help one person in my neighborhood or my city, I guarantee you we'd be a better place tomorrow. Anything else? I have another Marissa Kate story I can share.
Mr. Mayor, when you talk to other communities and people coming in to look at our city to see what we're doing well, what are a couple of areas that you brag on Wichita? What are some of the highlights that you point out that you think we can sort of export our best practices into other communities?
Well, and thank you. That's allowing me to answer that. And I'm going to steal and paraphrase from your boss first, because he shared this on national television, and I don't think you can get better publicity than having Charles Koch share on national television when they asked the question, why Wichita? And Charles Koch, and I'll paraphrase, so tell Charles if I butchered this, I apologize. He said, Wichita is a great place to raise a family and a better place to do business. And we are that, and so much more. And I like where we're going in the direction, and much of that's been set by previous councils. We have a fabulous river that's going to get better. We have a downtown that has really turned the corner. We have a building that sits at the corner of Market and Douglas that has been empty, folks, empty since 1985. And it's going to be totally rebuilt to have wonderful life back in that building. That is going to change downtown. What Gary Oborny's doing with Union Station is preserving an asset that is going to be a wonderful anchor on that side of town. What you're starting to see happen on the river is another wonderful opportunity to showcase our river and grow Wichita and grow our downtown. And so we have a lot of energy right now. We have some great corporate partners, and we are a great place to raise a family and a better place to do business. So thank you, Charles Koch. Yes.
Mayor, thanks for sharing with us. One of the things we've heard is that, I've seen in other places, that young people are kind of being challenged with lots of different things that are coming their way, some things that have turned to violence. One of the things that we've heard is not having resource officers in the school has maybe contributed to that officer-student discord. Is there any thought or talk about getting resource officers back to schools?
To answer your question, we haven't had those discussions. I can tell you I spent 12 years on a local school board, and Mays had their own team, and we had officers in every building, and they were engaged into the activities that were happening in the classroom, and it did make a difference. And I think you're right. Those are things that we've got to figure out how to do better again and team with our partners. And so those are discussions, hopefully, as we continue to see our economy grow here locally and experience some of the fruits. I've said this before. I was very fortunate to be at Mays for 12 years when the economy was incredibly robust. It didn't hurt that New Market Square came in and turned a bunch of wheat fields into millions of dollars of taxes for the school district. Thank you, Jerry Jones. And we saw our assessed valuation jump every year at Mays, and I've said this before, there were years and we almost had to invent ways to spend those dollars because we were lowering the mill levy and trying to balance it out, and everyone was happy because growth cures all ills. And we can get back there again. But you're right, if we're going to continue to combat some of those issues that happen at an early age, we need to figure out how to interact. We also need to figure out how to provide internships and jobs for some of those youth that can turn their life around in more meaningful ways. And we have some programs that are working in that direction also. And so there's no magic bullet that's going to solve any of those issues, certainly when you get into some of those social issues, but we think that with some of the partners that we have and some of the internships and some of the youth job programs that we have a fighting chance. Well, I will, yes. One more question, and we're probably out of time. And I'll end with a Marissa Kate story. Moji?
Politicians and business people often complain about the regulatory environment. If there's one thing that you could do differently in Wichita's regulatory environment, what would that be?
Wow. Being a small business person all my life, Moji, I can tell you one of the things that I'm working on right now, and it's really not so much the regulatory environment, because I'm going to tell you, Bob Layton gets it. I hate to brag on him when he's here or when there's cameras, because then he'll wonder. But he gets it when we talk about doing business with City Hall and how we have to change and become more customer friendly, and he has a program that's doing exactly that. But one of the things that we need to get beyond, and that's this issue that it's difficult just to do business in City Hall. And so when you come through City Hall today, you have to stand in line and go through the screening, and depending on the time of the day, it can be pretty cumbersome. And so we are trying, as a council, we have submitted an application to the state that said if we do a background check and have them sign a waiver and do all of these steps, can they get a badge to come into City Hall and bypass all of that so you can do business in City Hall at the very basic level. And the state denied our request. And so we are going to work with our legislatures this next season and say, can you tweak the exemptions so that we can put this process into play so that folks can come into City Hall if they're willing to get fingerprinted in the background check and go through all these steps and have a mayor or council sign off. You can get a badge, come into City Hall, and the first step with making it easier for businesses to do business with City Hall is get rid of the hassle of getting them in the door. And so we're going to work on that. So my wife, who's, I can say this because she's not here to defend herself, maybe not the best driver, picked up Marissa Kate from school one day, and as you can imagine, traffic out in West Wichita, especially on Mays Road in that Mays district, and our granddaughter Marissa Kate goes to Mays. You know, my wife almost gets in a wreck, and before she teaches Marissa some really colorful language, she caught herself and she said, Marissa, these drivers are so frustrating. She said, I know, Grandma, they're exasperating. So I hope I haven't been too exasperating today.